Have you ever found yourself exhausted just because of a gentle criticism, someone's indifferent glance, or an unintentional comparison? We often think that sadness comes from others, but in reality, it is our own ego that is the root cause of us being so easily hurt. When the ego is too large, we become sensitive to every gesture, every word, like a fragile leaf in the wind, swayed and stirred by even the slightest breeze. The ego is like an invisible burden we carry on our shoulders without realizing it, making our steps on life's journey heavy and weary. The Buddha once taught that the deep root of suffering is attachment to self, which means clinging to this ego. When we think we must be right, must be superior, must be recognized, that is precisely when we build a wall separating ourselves from peace. Try to imagine a vast river, its waters flowing gently, not vying with rocks and pebbles. It is precisely because the river embraces and lets go that it maintains its tranquility. But when we stubbornly cling, our heart is like a rock. The harder it is, the more easily it is worn down and fractured by life's currents. Many of us have suffered over a trivial matter, a sarcastic remark, a cold glance. But if we reflect, we will realize that it was the ego that deepened that pain. When we understand this, we begin to see clearly that it is not the external world that causes us suffering, but our own clinging to the ego within us that is the true Daya. And then, as we begin to learn how to let go of the ego, to open our hearts, we will feel much lighter, like a leaf. When it detaches from the branch, it doesn't fall heavily, but is lifted by the wind to return to the embrace of Mother Earth. With each mindful breath, remember that peace doesn't come from being superior to anyone, but from learning to return to ourselves, living with humility and compassion. This is the first door that opens the path to inner freedom, from which our soul can gradually heal and find peace in every moment. You are watching Lin Ung Buddhist Dharma channel. Dear friend, have you ever wondered why just an indifferent glance or an unintentional word can hurt you so deeply? Why can some people silence and let it go, while we hold on to the heaviness in our hearts? The answer lies very close. It is the ego within each of us. When the ego becomes too large, it is like a thick, invisible wall surrounding the heart, making the heart, which was once open, become small and closed off. No one gives us this ego, nor does anyone force it upon us. We are the ones who nurture it every day. And when the ego dominates, our heart gradually constricts, becoming narrow-minded and finding it difficult to receive love. Try to imagine a room filled with miscellaneous items, piled so high that there's no space left for light to shine in. The ego is like those items. The more you accumulate, the more cramped and stifling the room becomes. When the heart is full of ego, how can it be open for love and empathy to enter? The Buddha once taught that attachment to self is the root of suffering. When we cling tightly to the ego, if someone simply disagrees with us, we immediately get angry. If someone doesn't even look our way, we already feel abandoned. Life thus becomes a series of stressful days, and the soul never finds peace. A woman once recounted that she felt utterly miserable because her husband didn't praise the food she cooked. Just that silence was enough to make her lose sleep for many nights. In truth, that silence was not a significant matter, but because she placed her ego in it, expecting recognition, her disappointment multiplied many times over. When the ego reigns, we are easily hurt by the smallest things. Like an open wound, even a gentle breeze can cause us pain. The larger the ego, the deeper the loneliness. Because when we always think we must be right, must be superior, must be noticed, we also simultaneously erect walls separating ourselves from others. We want to prove ourselves, but the more we try to prove, the more distant we become. Deep down, our heart yearns to be loved, but the ego doesn't allow us to let go and love others. That is the human paradox. Like a thirsty tree that blocks all rain, eventually withering in the drought. Do you realize that when we enclose ourselves within the ego, our soul is nothing but a small birdcage? We lock ourselves inside. We look at the vast world outside, but lack the courage to spread our wings. Some people live their entire lives this way, clinging to the ego, only to find themselves lost and lonely in the end. The Buddha clearly stated that suffering does not come from external circumstances, but from our own mind. If the heart is obscured by the ego, then every life will be filled only with injustice and suffering. But when we learn to let go of the ego a little, something miraculous will happen. The heart will open up again, like the sky after a rain, clouds dispersing and light flooding back in. When we are no longer overly attached to ourselves, we will see that someone's glance is no longer disdain, but just an unintentional passing moment. Someone's words will no longer be a dagger piercing the heart, but simply an expression of opinion. Naturally, we will feel much lighter, no longer caught in the whirlwind of hurt. In the Four Noble Truths Sutra, the Buddha taught that the cause of suffering is craving, meaning clinging. The ego is a subtle form of clinging. We cling to our opinions, to the image we want others to see, to what we hope people will recognize. When that clinging is shaken, pain immediately surges forth. But if we know how to look directly at the root, we will realize that everything is like clouds passing across the sky. They come and go, and nothing lasts forever. At that moment, the ego gradually dissolves, and the heart opens wide and vast. Look to nature to find a simple lesson. A rice field bears abundant grains only when its stalks bow down. A river maintains its gentleness only by embracing all the soil and debris without complaint. The human heart is the same. Only when we know humility and compassion can we truly touch peace. A person with a large ego will always be lonely, but a person who knows how to let go of the ego will feel connected to the entire universe. So if you are feeling weary just because of a cold glance or an unkind word, try to look into your own heart. Are you perhaps holding on to an overly large ego? And perhaps it's time to gently let it go. Give yourself the opportunity to breathe, to live with an open heart where love and empathy can blossom. Finally, believe that when the ego dissolves, loneliness also vanishes, leaving only a gentle connection with everything. Like the morning sun stretching its rays across the world, not choosing anyone, but simply illuminating and warming. Your heart can be like that too. When you let go of the wall of ego, you will find yourself tolerant enough to love and stable enough for peace. And that is the priceless gift the Buddha's teachings wish to impart to each of us, so that amidst this ever-changing life, we can still live lightly, humbly, and filled with compassion. There are times in life when we hear the words, "let go," and immediately feel afraid, because we mistakenly believe that letting go means losing, being weak, being defeated, denying ourselves. Many people have asked, if I let go of the ego, what will be left of me? Will I become a person without a voice, without worth? It is precisely these anxieties that inadvertently make us cling tighter to the ego, trying harder to prove that we are important, that we need to be recognized. But in truth, letting go does not mean denying oneself. On the contrary, that is precisely the way for us to touch the purest part of ourselves, the part where humility, wisdom, and compassion always reside. Imagine a crystal clear lake. When we throw a stone into it, the surface of the water immediately ripples, and the reflection becomes distorted. Our ego is that stone. When we cling stubbornly to it, our heart is never calm. Letting go of the ego does not mean losing our presence, but simply not allowing it to dominate, not allowing it to disturb our soul. The water is still clear water. The lake still exists. The only difference is that now the lake's surface is calm enough to reflect the sky. We are still ourselves, but in a state of greater tranquility, vastness, and completeness. In life, we often see people who are very strong, always wanting to appear tough, unwilling to lose to anyone, yet deep in their eyes is endless weariness. They think that maintaining a high ego is preserving their armor, but in reality, it's just building a heavy suit of armor that prevents them from touching simple joys. The Buddha once taught, a person with wisdom does not need to compete to win or lose. A person with compassion does not need to prove right or wrong. When we know how to live humbly, that is when we are naturally respected. When we know compassion, that is when we possess true strength, because compassion helps us not be bound by anger and hurt. There's an old story about a student who came to a Zen master seeking guidance on the path to enlightenment. But upon arriving, he kept boasting that he had read many sutras, practiced meditation for many years, and achieved many accomplishments. The Zen master simply poured tea into his cup until the tea overflowed. The student exclaimed, "Master, the cup is full. Nothing more can be poured in." The Zen master smiled and replied, "Just as your mind is full of ego and attachment, how can it receive more wisdom?" That timeless teaching holds a profound message. Only when we let go of the ego can we truly open the door of our mind to receive truth, to see the light of compassion and wisdom. So, what is letting go? Letting go is reducing the need to prove you are right. Letting go is no longer overly worrying about what others think of you. Letting go is stopping the comparison of winning and losing, stopping the attempt to cover up hurts with a strong exterior. When we let go of the ego, we still live, still work, still love, but more lightly. We are no longer a boat struggling to set sail against a storm, but a boat that knows how to go with the wind, relaxing and letting the currents carry it to a peaceful shore. Consider a lotus flower. The lotus rises from the muddy swamp, but doesn't lose its pure fragrance because of it. The lotus doesn't boast its beauty. It simply emits its fragrance silently, bringing peace to anyone who approaches. Humans are the same. When we learn to let go of the ego, we no longer need to display our identity awkwardly. That identity naturally manifests in every gesture, every gentle glance, every kind word. That is the true value of a person. In the Dhammapada Sutra, the Buddha taught that conquering thousands of armies is not as great as conquering oneself. Letting go of the ego is the first step to conquering oneself. That is not a loss, but the greatest victory, because we overcome the invisible chains that have bound us for too long. When no longer led by the ego, we can live a free life, no longer suffering from judgment or fleeting praise and criticism. Remember that letting go is not weakness. Weakness is when we strain ourselves to prove we are strong. Letting go is true strength. Because we are stable enough not to need to prove anything, wise enough not to need to compete, compassionate enough to open our hearts without fear of being hurt. The more humble a person is, the more their inner light spreads. The more compassionate a person is, the more peaceful their life becomes. And that is the path to liberation that the Buddha wished to show us. If you feel stuck in your hurts, try sitting down quietly, breathing slowly, and telling yourself, I don't need to prove anything. I just need to return to myself, lightly and completely. At that moment, you will see a vast space in your heart where no storm can overwhelm you. It is a space of peace, of inner freedom, of the light of awakening. And now, I want to remind you that every time we let go of the ego, we lose nothing. On the contrary, we find ourselves again. We find the pure heart that has been covered for too long by layers of clinging dust. Like the sky. When the clouds disperse, the sky doesn't disappear. Rather, it reveals itself more clearly, deep, and boundless. You are the same. Your pure nature, wisdom, and compassion have never been lost, only waiting for you to let go of the ego to shine forth. Believe in that, so that amidst this ever-changing life, you can still live lightly, humbly, and full of love. Because only when you let go of the ego does your heart truly open. And you will realize that peace has never been far away, but always present in every breath, in every moment you return to yourself. Dear friend, there are times when our minds are cluttered with 100 concerns, feeling as if our heads are full, unable to take in anything more, like a cup already full of water. No matter how much more you pour, it will only overflow. That is also an image of the mind when the ego dominates, when our heart contains only attachment, competition, and the need to prove ourselves. In that state, wisdom cannot penetrate, compassion cannot sprout, just as seeds sown on barren ground cannot grow. I want to tell you an old Zen story for us to contemplate together. In those days, a famous scholar, profound and well-versed in scriptures, sought out a Zen master, hoping to learn the Dharma. He sat down before the Zen master, and even before clasping his hands, he began to talk incessantly about all he had read, studied, and understood. He recounted how many sutras he had researched, how he had taught, and how many accomplishments he had achieved in his career. The Zen master said nothing, simply placed a hot teapot on the table and began to pour tea into the scholar's cup. The tea filled the cup, but the master continued to pour. The water overflowed, spilled onto the table, and even onto the ground. The scholar was startled and exclaimed, "Master, the cup is full. Nothing more can be poured in." The Zen master stopped, looked at him calmly, and smiled. "Just as your mind is now full of knowledge, attachments, and pride in your ego, how can it receive more wisdom?" That teaching resonated like a bell of awakening. When the mind is full of ego, we are like that teacup. There is no more room for understanding, for love, for peace. No matter how much wisdom others pour into us from outside, no matter if we sit in temples, listening to scriptures day and night, wisdom cannot penetrate. Because the ego is inherently cramped, containing only self-satisfaction, rivalry, and pride in the self, while the wisdom taught by the Buddha can only land on the ground of humility and stillness. Let's look back at everyday life. There are people who have gone through countless schools, accumulated many degrees, and learned so much, yet their hearts remain restless, easily angered, and easily hurt. Then there are others who haven't studied much, but are always gentle, simple, and always bring comfort to others. Because wisdom is not about accumulating much knowledge, but about knowing how to let go a little, how to listen, how to open one's heart. As the Buddha taught, it is not by many words that one is called wise. Only when one lives peacefully, compassionately, and without harming others is that true wisdom. The ego always wants us to prove we are right, always seeks to defend our views, but precisely in that defense, we lose the opportunity to open our hearts. Sometimes, just a small piece of feedback can make us quickly take offense, get angry, and feel insulted. Our mind closes like a shut door, allowing no cool breeze to enter. Meanwhile, if we know how to let go of the ego, how to listen without immediately reacting, how to receive it as a gift rather than a challenge, then the door of our heart will open, and wisdom and love will seep in like morning sunlight, shining through the cracks to illuminate the entire dark room. That full teacup is also a metaphor for us when we stubbornly cling to our sorrows, angers, and ambitions. They take up all the space, making our hearts heavy. To truly learn compassion and wisdom, to live peacefully, the first thing is to practice letting go a little. Let go of a little anger, and we feel lighter. Let go of a little stubbornness, and we find our mind more at ease. Let go of the need to prove ourselves, and we find that we lose nothing but gain so much: peace, understanding, and vast love. In Zen traditions, there is a saying, "To pour in new water, first empty the old cup." This means we must practice letting the ego subside, making our mind as clear as a ripple-free lake surface. Only then can we receive the light of wisdom and compassion. No one can drink from an already full teacup, nor can anyone learn the Dharma with a heart full of self-satisfaction. You can try this in everyday life. When someone says something you disagree with, instead of rushing to react, you can pause, breathe deeply, and listen. When someone hurts you, instead of immediately erecting a wall of ego to resist, you can observe that pain within your heart and ask if you need to hold on to this hurt forever. With just a moment of letting go, you will find your heart expand And that very spaciousness will be the place where peace resides. The Buddhist sutras once reminded us, like a beautiful flower without fragrance, eloquent words without practice are useless. If we only talk about compassion, talk about wisdom, but our mind is still full of ego clinging, it is no different from a flower without fragrance. But if we are willing to let go, to open our hearts, to allow wisdom to permeate every action, then our words will naturally have the power to spread, like a flower whose fragrance soothes the entire garden. Dear friend, the story of the full teacup is not just a Zen anecdote, but also a mirror reflecting everyday life. It reminds us that to learn, to grow, to unfold compassion and wisdom, we must first make space within our hearts. You don't have to let go of everything at once. Just let go a little, each day. Shed a grain of ego dust each day. And then you will find your mind as light as a cloud, as clear as a dewdrop, as vast as a cloudless sky. And I believe that when you truly let go, you will feel simple joy in every small thing. A bird's song will be enough to stir your heart. A golden ray of sunlight falling through the leaves will be enough for you to feel grateful. A smile given will be enough to brighten your whole day. All these things can only come when your heart is no longer cramped by the ego, but broad enough to embrace the wondrous things always present around you. Believe that within you, the seeds of wisdom and compassion already exist. You just need to let go of the ego, emptying the cup within your heart. Then those seeds will sprout, grow, and spread like a green forest, shading your soul and those around you. How many times have you wanted to let go of anger, pride, or a habit of competition, but in the end, couldn't? Sometimes you know clearly that the ego is the source of suffering. You know that clinging to it only makes your heart heavier, but every time something happens, it rises powerfully, making you react, drawing you into a whirlwind of sadness, anger, envy, and rivalry. So why is letting go of the ego so difficult? If we look deep inside, we will see that the ego does not arise naturally. It is formed from childhood. As we grow up with the teachings and expectations of parents, teachers, and society. From a young age, we were told to study well, to be superior to others, to strive not to be outdone by friends. These words came from love, from a desire for us to succeed. But inadvertently, they sowed a seed in our hearts, that we only have value when we are better than others, that we are only worthy of love when we excel. And so, over the years, that seed grew into the ego, into a protective shell that we always carry. The ego gradually becomes a suit of armor that makes us feel safe, helping us feel confident as we navigate life. It protects us from hurt, from feelings of inferiority, from the fear of being looked down upon. But that very armor turns into an invisible prison, because when the ego is too large, we can no longer see the truth, no longer see people's hearts, no longer see the simple peace that already exists within us. We only view life through the lens of comparison, winning and losing, success and failure. And like a lost bird, we fly endlessly within an invisible cage without realizing that the door is already open. In Buddhist sutras, it is taught that ego is the root of suffering. If ego clinging is released, suffering will cease. But letting go of ego clinging is not easy. because the ego has become a deeply ingrained habit, clinging tightly to our every thought, word, and reaction. It's like a shadow that always follows us, even when we don't want it to. When someone praises us, the ego swells with delight. When someone criticizes us, the ego feels painful hurt. When someone is superior to us, the ego feels envious. When we are superior to others, the ego feels proud. And so, our entire lives are guided by an illusory shadow. And we forget that our true nature is unbound. The Lin Ung Buddhist Dharma Sutra recalls a time when a friend confided that, from childhood, he had always tried to prove himself. He studied well, worked tirelessly, and achieved many accomplishments that others admired. But the more achievements he had, the lonelier he felt. Because in his heart, the ego always whispered, "You must do more. You're not good enough. You're not allowed to lose to anyone." And so, even standing on a high platform, he still felt insecure, still feared that one day he would fall. I suddenly realized that the ego not only traps us in pride, but also binds us tightly in constant anxiety. Letting go of the ego is difficult because we mistakenly believe it is who we are. We think that without the ego, we will become weak, no longer respected by anyone. But the truth is the opposite. The ego is just a layer of clothing, while our true nature is openness, love, and wisdom that already exist. When we let go of the ego, it doesn't mean we lose anything, but rather that we return to ourselves. Like when we abandon a cramped cage, only then are we truly free to fly in the sky. So, what can help us shed that protective layer? The answer lies in mindfulness and compassion. Mindfulness is like a shining lamp that helps us recognize when the ego is arising. Every time we find ourselves angry because we feel insulted, sad because we feel disregarded, or gloating when praised, that is when the lamp of mindfulness reminds us that this is just the ego, not our true nature. When we see it, we are no longer led by it. And compassion is the cool water that can soften the stubborn ego. When we truly love someone, we no longer want to compete with them, no longer want to prove we are better or more right. At that moment, the ego melts away, making room for genuine connection. The Buddha once taught that hatred cannot be dispelled by hatred. Only love can dispel hatred. The ego is the seed that gives rise to hatred. So only by nurturing love can we transform it. You can start with small things. When someone makes a mistake, instead of criticizing, try to put yourself in their shoes to understand. When someone succeeds, instead of comparing yourself, practice rejoicing with them. When you make a mistake, instead of blaming yourself, embrace yourself with compassion. Moments like these are when you are gradually undoing each link of the ego. You don't need to let go of everything at once. Just a little each day. And then you will see that prison gradually open, and your soul begin to expand. Dear friend, letting go of the ego is difficult because it has been ingrained in us since childhood, because we still mistakenly believe it is strength, it is value. But if we persistently cultivate mindfulness and compassion, we will come to see the truth, that we don't need the ego to be loved. We don't need to be superior to others to feel valuable. True value lies in peace, in spreading love, in the ability to live with humility. And one day, you will realize that letting go of the ego is not a loss. but an opening for a vast suit to appear within. In that sky, you are no longer bound by winning and losing, by gain and loss, but you live lightly, freely, like a cloud drifting in the wind, like a river flowing to the sea, leisurely and full of freedom. Have you ever felt weary in your heart from constantly having to try and prove your worth to others? Have you ever suddenly realized that even after achieving what you wanted, even after being praised or lauded, your heart still isn't truly at peace? The truth is, we often mistakenly believe that strength lies in being praised, being prominent, being respected. But then, increasingly, we realize that these are merely fleeting breezes, arriving and departing, leaving behind a vast emptiness in our hearts. Only when we learn to live humbly do we touch true strength, a quiet yet resilient strength that nothing can disturb. Humility, many mistakenly believe, is weakness, inferiority, or lack of confidence. But in truth, humility is the manifestation of a strong and stable inner self. A humble person doesn't need to prove themselves because they clearly understand that their worth does not lie in comparison. They don't envy others' success, don't collapse when scorned, and aren't swayed by praise or criticism. They live like a river, always flowing silently to the sea, carrying much silt but never boasting. The Buddha once taught that a humble person walks through life with peace. The teaching is simple, yet it contains profound wisdom. A humble person is like a field of ripe, golden rice. The more grain it bears, the lower its head bows. That is not a sign of inferiority, but a manifestation of fullness. A truly wise person doesn't need to stand tall and look down on others. Instead, they bow down to listen, to understand, to love. Lin Ung Buddhist Dharma channel recalls once meeting a Zen master who was old, small in stature, and dressed very simply. Upon entering the room, he bowed his head to each person, his eyes as gentle as a child's. No one would have thought that this Zen master had been sought out by thousands of people from all over to learn the Dharma. A student asked him, "Master, you are a wise person, yet why are you always so humble?" He smiled and gently replied, "Because I know that wisdom is not mine alone. It is merely a stream flowing by, and I am just the fortunate one who drank from it first." After hearing that, I suddenly realized that humility doesn't make a person smaller, but makes their heart larger. In everyday life, we can easily see the difference between a humble person and one led by the ego. A person dominated by the ego is often sensitive to praise and criticism, always wants to be superior, easily gets angry, and is easily hurt. They are like a dry leaf, disturbed by even a gentle breeze. A humble person, however, is like a sturdy tree trunk. No matter how fierce the storms outside, that tree trunk stands firm because its roots are deep in the earth. A humble person is rooted in wisdom and compassion, so their mind is no longer swayed by life's ups and downs. There's a small story I once heard about a very gifted student, praised wherever he went. One day, he went to his master and said, "Master, I have studied much. I understand much. I am better than my peers. I feel I am complete." The master looked at him, smiled, and offered him a cup of tea. The master poured the tea until it overflowed. The student was startled. "Master, why are you doing that?" The master gently replied, "You are like this teacup. When you think you are full, you have no more room to receive anything. Only when you know humility can you truly learn." From then on, the student understood that no matter how much he knew, it was still just a tiny grain of ferd in the endless ocean of wisdom. Humility doesn't make you lose out. On the contrary, it opens a door to freedom. When you live humbly, you don't need to compete for light because you are already light. You don't need to seek recognition because your worth no longer depends on others' eyes. Humility helps you see yourself as just a part of the vast universe. And from that, you learn how to live in harmony, how to love, how to let go. Try observing nature around you. Majestic, high mountains stand silently, without needing to boast. The vast ocean always humbles itself to embrace all rivers. The sun brings light to all beings every day, yet never proclaims itself great. All live in humility. And because of this, they shine in the most natural way. Humans are the same. Only when we know humility do we truly blend into the rhythm of life. Perhaps you have suffered from having to strain yourself to prove something. Perhaps you have been hurt by others' contempt. But please remember that the seed of humility is already within you. It lies dormant in your heart, waiting to be nourished by mindfulness and compassion. When you know how to live humbly, you will feel lighter, less anxious, and happiness will naturally blossom in your soul. So, if today you feel weary from competition, give yourself a moment of stillness. Breathe deeply, slowly, then look into your heart. You will see that true strength does not lie in ambition, but in quietude, not in stepping over others, but in supporting. They walk together, not in being acclaimed, but in being able to live fully and sincerely with themselves. You can imagine that if you walked a lifetime on a path full of conflict and comparison, you would surely be exhausted. But if you walk with a humble heart, you will find that path becomes as light as a shaded lane beneath green trees, with cool breezes, birdsong, and the light of dawn shining down. You walk without hurry, without competition, because you already know that as long as your steps are firm, each step is a happiness. Dear friend, humility is not losing yourself, but finding yourself again. It is not weakness, but a quiet and enduring strength. A strength that helps you live peacefully amidst life's changes. And when you possess that strength, you will no longer be swept away by praise or criticism, gain or loss, but will become a tranquil mountain, a gentle river, a field of ripe grain, walking through life with peace, walking through life with inner freedom. Have you ever realized that in many conversations, we don't truly want to listen to others, but only want to be right ourselves? Want our words to be recognized? Want our ego to be satisfied? Yet, even when we win an argument, our heart isn't truly at peace. It's like a lake's surface after a stone has been thrown into it. Ripples spread in circles, unable to become still. That victory doesn't foster peace. Instead, it makes us feel lonelier, more distant. Because the ego always likes to be right, likes to win, but our heart only yearns for peace and love. Once, as I sat by the river, I saw a small sparrow drinking water. Suddenly, Another bird flew over to compete for the spot, and both birds lunged at each other. In just a few brief seconds, the tranquility of the water's surface vanished, replaced by frantic flapping wings. Seeing that scene, I suddenly thought, isn't our life the same? When the ego speaks, when we only want to be right, to be superior, then the peace within our hearts is also disturbed. The ego is inherently small, but when we cling to it, when we let it control us, the vast heart suddenly becomes narrow. The Buddha taught that suffering begins with attachment to self, with the ego that refuses to let go. When we cling to it, we see ourselves and others as separate. We see everyone as an adversary. We feel we must be superior, must win, must gain. But when we let go of the ego, that illusion dissipates. We begin to see the suffering of others. We begin to understand that they too are struggling, carrying fears and wounds in their hearts, just like us. From that, a new current flows within us, gentle and warm. That is compassion. There's a story about the Buddha that I always remember. In those days, a man full of anger came to the Buddha and verbally abused him terribly. He thought the Buddha would react, get angry, and argue to defend his honor. But the Buddha simply smiled, listening in stillness. When the man was breathless from exhaustion, the Buddha gently asked, "If someone offers you a gift and you do not accept it, to whom does that gift belong?" The man replied, surprised, "Why, of course, it still belongs to the giver." The Buddha gently said, "Then the words you have just offered me, since I do not accept them, still belong to you." With just one gentle sentence, the man awakened, tears falling. He realized that peace doesn't lie in winning or losing, but in knowing how to stop the ego, to open up empathy. In everyday life, you can clearly see this. When the ego is touched, we easily get angry, easily judge. Even an unintentional word is enough to hurt us because we feel disregarded. But if we slow our breath, if we let go of the ego, we can look deeper. Perhaps the other person spoke harsh words because they themselves are suffering. Perhaps they acted unkindly because their heart is full of unhealed wounds. When we see their suffering, compassion naturally arises within us. And compassion begins there, in the place where the ego has just closed. You can try to imagine our heart as a garden. When the ego occupies it, that garden is full of fences. But when we let it go, that garden expands. The flowers of compassion begin to bloom, and their fragrance spreads. Compassion is not something distant. It doesn't require us to strain ourselves. It is simply a gentle gaze, a comforting hand clasp, an empathetic smile. Compassion is the door that opens when your ego closes. I remember once at a temple, there was a very young novice monk, newly ordained. While working, he accidentally dropped a precious vase. The other monks scolded him, calling him careless. The novice was frightened and cried. At that moment, the abbot came, looked at the broken vase, then turned and embraced the novice. The abbot said, "The vase can be replaced, but your heart cannot. Don't be afraid. Mistakes are just lessons for you to grow." The entire room fell silent. There were no words of reproach, only compassion. And it was that compassion that helped the novice grow up, not with guilt, but with love. When the ego stops, we no longer see mistakes as opportunities to scold, but as opportunities to understand. We no longer see others as adversaries, but as fellow human beings, learning to navigate life's lessons with us. Compassion is that very strength, a strength that prevents us from being drowned in anger, allowing us to embrace both ourselves and others with a vast heart. Dear friend, perhaps you have been hurt by harsh words. Perhaps you have been weary from constantly having to prove yourself right. But please remember that your heart inherently does not need arguments to find peace. It only needs you to know how to stop, how to let go of the ego. When you truly let go, you will find yourself capable of deep insight, capable of understanding others, capable of unconditional love. If today your heart is turbulent, please try to sit still for a moment. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in. Then slowly breathe out. Look within yourself, at your anger, your pain, your desire to be right, to be superior. Smile at them, then gently let them go. And you will see that as the ego settles, a new sky opens within your heart. That sky holds the light of understanding, the warmth of love, the cool stream of compassion. Compassion begins not far away, but precisely when you stop your ego. That compassion will guide you through suffering, guiding you to peace. And when you have touched compassion, you will see there is nothing left to argue about winning or losing, nothing left to claim right or wrong. Only an open heart embracing this life with gentleness, peace, and completeness remains. There are times in life when we feel cornered at a narrow crossroads. On one side is pride, wanting to push forward, to prove oneself, to gain the upper hand. On the other side is a gentle inner prompting, reminding us to step back, to let things flow. Choose peace instead of victory. But is stepping back weakness or inferiority? In truth, taking a step back is sometimes a manifestation of wisdom, because when we step back, we see more broadly, more deeply, and we can love more. As an ancient saying goes, take one step back, and the sea is vast, the sky is high. I once witnessed a story in a small family. A young couple, busy and tired, raised their voices at each other over a very minor issue. The wife accused her husband of not paying attention to her, while the husband reacted because he felt misunderstood. Both remained tense, each having their say, each wanting to prove themselves right. But then the husband suddenly fell silent. He no longer argued. Instead, he stepped closer, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, and said, "I know you're upset. Let's take a break and talk later, okay?" Just one small step back, but the atmosphere in the room immediately changed. The wife burst into tears, and the two embraced. If, at that moment, the husband had continued to push forward, wanting to win, they would probably have lost an entire night of peace. But he chose to step back. And thanks to that step back, love was preserved, and peace was nurtured. The Buddha taught that a wise person is not one who always wins, but one who knows how to choose what is truly important. In the Dhammapada, there is a verse, "Conquering thousands of armies is not as great as conquering oneself. Winning over others only makes the ego grow. But conquering oneself, conquering anger, conquering pride, brings lasting peace and happiness." When we step back, we are not losing. We are simply conquering the ego within us. And it is then that we become truly strong. Think about how many times in life we have been hurt just because we refused to back down. An unintentional word, a trivial action. But because we refused to yield, we let relationships fracture. The ego is like a small flame, but if we fan it with arguments, it can burn down an entire forest of love. Meanwhile, if we just take one step back, allowing the wind of empathy to blow through, that flame will naturally die down, leaving coolness in the soul. Imagine you are walking on a beach and a large wave is rushing towards you. If you try to resist, the wave will engulf you. But if you step back, wait for the wave to pass, you will still stand firm and can even admire the beauty of the ocean. Life is the same. Often, its storms are not for us to confront, but for us to learn to step back, to observe, and from that, to understand that all things are impermanent. All waves will pass. The person who knows how to step back is one who clearly sees impermanence, because they understand that today's wins and losses will hold no meaning tomorrow. An argument can make us lose a precious relationship, while one step back can preserve a lifelong bond. So choosing to step back is not cowardice. It is choosing what endures, choosing peace for the soul. A Zen master once taught that when we take one step back, the space before us opens up. When we take another step back, the entire sky becomes vast. That teaching is truly simple, yet profound. Indeed, when we are only focused on moving forward, we only see the narrow path directly in front of us. But when we step back, we see an entire, vast expanse. In that space, we are no longer trapped in competition, but can clearly see the impermanent nature of all things. You can try to recall a time when you stepped back. Perhaps it was when you remained silent instead of retaliating with harsh words. Perhaps it was when you chose to yield to another in an argument. And then, after stepping back, you felt lighter. You saw that the relationship was preserved. You realized you lost nothing, but gained additional peace. Taking a step back, it turns out, is a way to open the heart. In stillness, I often recall the image of the moon reflected on a lake's surface. When the water ripples, the moon appears distorted and flickering. But when the water settles, the moon appears perfectly round. Similarly, when we refuse to step back, our mind is turbulent, and the image of truth becomes distorted. But when we are willing to step back, willing to let our mind settle, the truth appears clear and bright. Step back to see. Step back to understand. Step back to love. Perhaps right now, you are experiencing tense relationships. Perhaps you feel tired from arguing, from having to prove yourself, from having to be right. But please try to stop. Try to take a step back. Not to concede defeat, but to preserve peace in your heart, to preserve precious things in life. Taking a step back doesn't make you smaller. It makes you greater. And you will see that when you know how to step back, the sea will open wide, the sky will be high and blue, your heart will be lighter, your eyes brighter. And you will realize that happiness, after all, doesn't lie in winning, but in knowing how to preserve what you love. Stepping back is not losing. It is gaining the entire sky. Remember that one step back today can save a lifelong bond. One step back today can open up a space of peace for you. And one step back today is a sign of a soul that has touched wisdom. There are days in life when one feels as if living in a cramped room. Even though the sky outside is vast, worries, fears, anger, and even wounds from the past pile up, making the soul feel imprisoned. People still walk around, still laugh and talk, still busy with countless tasks. But inside, they are full of pressure, as if carrying an invisible rope tied around their heart. That rope is the ego. It is so tightly bound that every step feels heavy, and each time one tries to escape, it feels as if it tightens another loop. The Buddha once taught that humanity's greatest suffering is clinging. And the greatest clinging is clinging to the self, to the ego. The ego is like a golden cage, shining brightly on the outside, making people think it is precious and luxurious. But in reality, inside it is a cramped space. No sky, no wind, no freedom. We lock ourselves in it and then believe it is the safest place. But in truth, it is a prison that prevents the soul from soaring far. Letting go of the ego, therefore, is not a loss. It is a liberation. It is the key that unlocks the door that has been tightly shut for a long time. And once the door opens, what we receive is inner freedom. It is the most precious reward that no power, no wealth, no person can bestow or take away. It is self-sustaining happiness, like a lotus flower rising from the muddy swamp, proudly emitting its fragrance without being tainted by the mud. Someone once confided that their whole life they wished only to live in peace. But the more they sought peace, the more restless they felt. They bought many things to feel complete. They pursued status to feel important. They sought love to fill the emptiness in their hearts. But after all that, they still felt lonely and tired. Only when they began to learn how to sit still and look within themselves did they realize that what made them restless was not external, but internal. Clinging. When they could let go of the ego that always demanded to be right, to be superior, to be loved more, then the mind had space for the light of life to enter. The Buddha once compared the human mind to a lake. If the surface of the lake is full of debris, the water will be murky and unable to reflect anything. The ego is like those pieces of debris. Every time we get angry, envious, arrogant, or clingy, we are throwing another handful of mud into the lake water. Only by letting go and stopping throwing in more mud can the lake surface settle and become clear enough to reflect the clouds, sky, mountains, and even the soft, bright moon. Inner freedom is when that lake surface returns to its inherent stillness. In life, we often think that letting go will make us weak, but in reality, the opposite is true. A person with inner freedom is the strongest because they are not swayed by praise or criticism, gain or loss, success or failure. They are like a sturdy pine tree in the mountains. Storms may blow through, but cannot uproot it. That strength doesn't come from resistance, but from inner peace, from knowing that all things are impermanent. All are just fleeting waves on the vast ocean. A master once said, "Inner freedom doesn't come from how many things you have in your hands, but from how much your mind is still bound." Some people live in a small house, but find peace every day because their hearts are not heavy with competition. Conversely, some people live in magnificent mansions, but are still restless because they constantly fear loss, always wanting to be superior to others. In reality, happiness and freedom have never been things that come from outside. They only blossom when the ego stops demanding. Try to imagine a small stream in a deep forest. The stream water does not compete, does not try to compare itself with the vast ocean or the mighty river. It simply flows silently, weaving through every rock crevice, cool and nourishing plants and grass. And it is precisely in this simplicity that it becomes pure, fresh, and brings life. Humans are the same. When we are no longer pushed by the ego into comparison, into winning and losing, we truly live fully in our own existence. Letting go of the ego means we accept that sometimes we don't need to win every argument, don't need to always be right in every conversation, because winning over others at the cost of inner peace is too expensive. Conversely, when we know how to stop, to yield a little, to keep our hearts from churning, that is the greatest victory. The Buddha once taught that conquering thousands of armies on the battlefield is not as great as conquering oneself. And conquering oneself begins with casting aside the proud ego. A person with inner freedom lives in the world as if standing on a riverbank watching the water flow. They see life's currents pass by, see people come and go, see joy and sorrow appear in turns. But they are not swept along. Their mind is as wide as the sky, capable of containing white clouds and even storms, yet still retaining its inherent boundlessness. When we look deeply, we realize that inner freedom is what we have been searching for all along, in many different forms. We think that wealth will give us freedom, but the richer we become, the more we fear. We think that fame will give us happiness, but the higher the fame, the larger its shadow, and the tighter the ego clenches. Only when we turn inward and let go of attachment do we see that freedom has never left us. It was only obscured by the veil of the ego. It can be said that inner freedom is a flower that blooms from within. It doesn't need anyone's gaze, doesn't need praise, doesn't need any conditions to exist. It only needs a clean plot of land, and that land is the heart that has learned to let go. And when the flower blooms, its fragrance will spread, making this life gentler, more peaceful. If at any time you feel stifled, feel heavy pressures, try to stop, take a deep breath, and look within. Ask yourself, what is making me restless? Often, the answer will relate to the ego. We fear losing our image, fear others won't recognize us, fear not living up to expectations. When we see that root, we can smile and let go. Inner freedom is not a distant destination. It is a journey. And every moment we let go of a part of the ego is a moment we step closer to freedom. It is like a long flight where passengers must leave behind heavy luggage to take off. Our mind is the same. Only when we are light can we fly into the realm of peace. When we let go, we lose nothing. Instead, we regain everything. We regain peace, spaciousness, inner freedom. That is a gift that no one can bestow, and no one can take away. It belongs to us like our breath, like our heart. And once that gift is opened, it will make this life brighter, more beautiful, and lighter. Perhaps humanity's journey to find happiness is not about finding a place outside, but about finding the home of the soul again. And that home truly opens only when the ego is let go. In that home, there are no more chains, no more prisons, only freedom, tranquility, radiance like the moon in a still sky. So if your heart feels heavy at this moment, please allow yourself to breathe deeply and gently let go. Don't rush. Don't force it. Just a little, like a flower petal falling onto the water, silently, but full of meaning. Then, day by day, you will see a white lotus blossom in your heart. That lotus is a symbol of inner freedom, a testament that when you let go of the ego, you have found the greatest reward in life. One very ordinary morning, on a crowded, bustling bus, an elderly man, his back hunched and hands trembling, clung to a seat handle, his eyes longing for a place to sit. The young man occupying a nearby seat hesitated for a moment, the familiar internal struggle arising. To yield meant standing and aching feet. To remain seated brought a pang of conscience. But then, as he gently stood up and offered the seat to the elderly man, the man's face lit up with a kind smile, his eyes sparkling with gratitude. With just that small act, the young man's heart suddenly felt much lighter, as if he had just set down an invisible stone within himself. That was a moment of letting go of the ego, opening up a vast expanse in his heart. In everyday life, many people think that letting go is something grand, that one must abandon everything, go to a temple, or retreat to the mountains. But in reality, letting go begins with the simplest things that any of us can practice right away. An apology for accidentally hurting someone, a smile instead of holding a grudge, choosing silence instead of arguing to the bitter end. Each time we humble the ego a little, our heart expands a little more. The Buddha once taught that those who are skilled at letting go taste the sweetness of liberation right in this life. Letting go is not something that only happens when we close our eyes and depart this world, but it is present in every breath, in every way we engage with this life. There are arguments where everyone wants to be right. In those moments, the ego rises powerfully, refusing to back down. But even when we win with words, is our heart truly at peace? Often, such a victory brings only a fleeting sense of triumph, followed by a heavy emptiness. Meanwhile, if we choose to remain silent and yield to the other person, sometimes no one truly loses, and we ourselves gain peace. Like a clear lake that, when stirred, allows the muddy sand to settle slowly. Silence and letting go allow our soul to return to its inherent stillness. It is then that we clearly see that happiness does not lie in winning or losing, but in the ability to maintain inner peace. Lessons from everyday life are precisely the doors that lead us to inner freedom. An apology can dissolve the invisible walls separating two hearts. A nod of acceptance, instead of stubbornly defending one's own viewpoint, can save a fracturing relationship. A person who knows how to let go in small matters is sowing the seeds of great happiness. We often think happiness is something distant to be sought, but in truth, it is present in every moment when we dare to put the ego aside and allow our heart to open. Imagine a rainy, gray day where everyone is rushing. Some are pushing, some are irritable, some are snapping. If, in that moment, we pause to shield a wet child with an umbrella or yield the path to someone in a hurry, our heart naturally feels warm. That warmth does not come from anyone giving it to us, but gushes forth from within us. Letting go of the ego is not losing anything. It is opening the treasure trove of love that already exists within us. Once, a student asked the Buddha, "Venerable One, how will I know if I am truly practicing letting go?" He smiled gently and said, "When you find your heart lighter, less angry, more loving towards others, that is when you have walked on the path of letting go." That teaching is simple, yet profound. No one measures letting go by numbers or external metrics, but by the change in one's own consciousness. Practicing letting go in daily life is not easy, because the ego always wants to be nurtured. It whispers in our ears that we must be right, we must be superior, we must be recognized. But each time we listen to our breath, returning to the present, we will recognize that ego. It is just a thin layer of clouds, while the sky of our soul is truly vast. When the clouds disperse, the blue sky clearly appears. Similarly, when the ego settles, compassion and wisdom shine forth. If each day we practice letting go a little, we will find life gradually becoming lighter. It may be difficult at first, but like learning to walk, small steps will lead to big ones. Yielding a seat once, apologizing once, remaining silent once, wishing well for others instead of envying them. Each such instance is a lotus petal blooming in our heart, adding fragrance and color to life. A person who knows how to let go will find life not so heavy because they have set down unnecessary burdens. In each ordinary moment, we are invited to awaken. When we let go, we not only bring joy to others, but also nurture that very joy within our own hearts. Each small action contains a healing power. They are like raindrops gradually soaking into dry earth, germinating the seeds of love and peace. And then, when we look back, we will realize that letting go has never been a loss. It is a return to the spaciousness of the soul, a return to joy that is inherently unconditional. This life may be impermanent, but each time we let go is a time we open the door to freedom. Let our heart be like a calm lake reflecting the boundless sky. Let each day of living be a reminder that freedom is not far away, but right in the act of letting go in every tiny moment. In that stillness, we will see a silent source of light shining. It is not an external light, but an inner light, which no one can take away. When we let go of the ego in very ordinary things, we are truly sowing the seeds of enlightenment. And those seeds will blossom into seasons of peace and inner freedom. There are evenings when we sit silently watching a river flow, and we feel something quite peculiar. The water quietly drifts along, not competing, not arguing, not trying to prove it is higher or stronger. Yet, it is this humility and softness that make the river boundless, nurturing countless lives along its banks. Lush trees, birds returning, people coming to drink, all are embraced by the river, without distinction. The love of a person who has let go of the ego is like that, present gently, purely, nourishing, and bringing peace to all who are fortunate enough to encounter it. When a person is still heavy with ego, the mind is often like a flame, easily flaring up when touched, easily burning oneself and those around. But when the ego is let go, that flame gradually dies down, making way for the cool breeze of inner peace. A person with pure love usually doesn't need to speak up to assert themselves. Their very presence is enough to make others feel lighter, just as we feel light when sitting in the shade of a dense tree on a scorching day. The Buddha once taught that a compassionate mind is like the ocean. It doesn't distinguish which river water flows into it, nor is it depleted by the waves. True love is also like that. Unconditional, undiscriminating, not dependent on who is worthy or unworthy, but simply because its nature is to spread and to heal. Have you ever met someone with whom, just by sitting nearby without saying a word, you felt more at peace? That is the energy of a person who knows how to let go of the ego and cultivate love. They don't need to prove their cleverness or superiority, yet they make everyone they interact with feel uplifted. Like the fragrance of a flower, it spreads naturally without needing an introduction. Such a person, their gentleness has more healing power than 1,000 pieces of advice. In everyday life, we easily fall into comparison and envy. Seeing someone else succeed, we easily feel a pang of sadness. Seeing others being loved, we easily feel jealousy. These are moments when the ego is dominating, causing us to close our hearts. But when we practice letting go, instead of envying, we can bless the other person. Instead of comparing, we can learn. Instead of closing ourselves off, we can open our hearts. Each time we do this, the love within us is nurtured. It grows not because someone gives it to us, but precisely from our act of letting go. Just as a tree only needs earth and water, love only needs the absence of the ego to blossom. The Buddha repeatedly reminded us that a person with a loving heart is like the light of a lamp. Even if it lights 1,000 other lamps, that light never diminishes. True love is the same. The more it is given, the fuller it becomes. The more it spreads, the brighter it shines. A person who nurtures love within themselves never feels a loss when giving, because they know the nature of love is to nourish both sides. There is an old story about a disciple who asked the Buddha, "Venerable One, if I love others, but they do not return that love, is it wasted?" The Buddha simply looked into his eyes and said, "My child, when you light a lamp, the light first illuminates the room where you are sitting. Even if others do not see it, you yourself have already enjoyed that light." Love is like that. It is never wasted. For first and foremost, it brightens and warms your own heart. Therefore, when we know how to let go of the ego, we open up a cool, refreshing spring. Wherever that spring flows, it revitalizes that place. In the family, it resolves minor conflicts. In friendship, it fosters trust. In work, it makes the atmosphere more pleasant. A person with love no longer needs to compete for position or voice, because their very peaceful presence is a strength. They don't need to assert themselves, yet they inspire, comfort, and accept those around them. If you pay attention, you will see that the more compassionate and humble people are, the happier they become. They are less bound by competition so their hearts are light as clouds. They're less obsessed with what others think, so they live as freely as the wind. And because they don't let the ego take control, they easily forgive, easily love, easily connect. Life for them is not a battlefield, but a garden. In that garden, everyone who comes is watered with gentleness and then carries away a little joy. When we learn to let go, we are also learning to return to our inherent compassionate nature. For deep down, each of us carries the seed of love. The ego is just a covering cloud, while love is the true sky. When the clouds disperse, the blue sky clearly appears. When the ego is let go, love naturally manifests without needing to be forced or sought. Try looking into a child's eyes just once. You will see no calculation of winning or losing there, only innocence and pure love. Love is inherently like that, unconditional, undiscriminating, limitless. We have carried it in our hearts since birth. Only over time did the ego grow and obscure it. Now, by practicing letting go, we are simply returning to that wellspring of love. Each day, we can nurture love with the simple things: a smile to a stranger, a hug for a loved one, a word of encouragement for someone feeling down. Each such action, if not interfered with by the ego, becomes pure, like a clear morning dewdrop reflecting the sunlight. And these small things contribute to nurturing a vast soul. At this point, you might ask yourself if you are capable enough to let go of the ego, to nurture love. The answer is yes, because love is already within you. You don't need to search outside. You just need to quiet down, breathe deeply, observe what is happening, and choose a softer attitude. At that very moment, the stream of compassion will begin to flow. And then you will realize that living in love is the greatest reward of letting go of the ego. It is not something that comes from outside, but a gift arising from an open heart. A person with love doesn't need to prove anything, doesn't need to compete, yet anyone who crosses their path feels uplifted, as if stumbling upon a cool breeze on a sweltering day. So let each day be an opportunity for us to put down the ego and allow the love within us to grow. For when love is present, the darkness of anger, jealousy, and comparison will naturally vanish. And in that light, we will find ourselves free. Find life gentle. Find our hearts light as a stream flowing for thousands of miles without ever tiring. In life, perhaps what causes people the most suffering is not major events, but the subtle cracks in familiar relationships. Sometimes it's just an unrestrained word, a misunderstanding glance, a small incident that isn't resolved, yet it causes family bonds to gradually drift apart, friendships to grow cold, and spouses to turn their backs on each other. The deep-seated reason usually doesn't lie in the triviality itself, but in the ego's refusal to humble itself. When both sides want to be right, and no one is willing to yield, the wound will be prolonged, turning into a difficult-to-mend gap. Some people, because of a single argument, remain silent with each other for years. Some families break apart over a small conflict, leaving behind many regrets. In truth, if one person were compassionate enough, knowing how to let go of the ego, to open their heart and forgive, things might have turned out very differently. Forgiveness is not weakness, much less being exploited. It is the strength of someone who chooses love instead of the ego. The Buddha once taught that hatred never ceases by hatred, but only by love. Forgiveness is the path that helps us step out of the cycle of hatred. Holding on to resentment is like tightly gripping a burning coal. We think we are holding it to throw at someone else, but in reality, our own hand gets burned first. Forgiveness is when we let go of that coal, allowing our hands to be free and peace to return. People sometimes misunderstand that forgiveness means accepting others' wrongdoings or letting oneself be taken advantage of. But in fact, forgiveness is not agreement, nor is it forgetting completely, but choosing not to let the past continue to bind one's soul. Forgiving others is also a way we forgive ourselves. For when the heart no longer harbors resentment, it then has room for joy to blossom. Imagine, in a garden, if we keep focusing on a withered tree trunk, we won't see how many other flowers are blooming all around. Resentment is like that dry trunk. The more we stare at it, the more we miss the opportunity to appreciate the beauty of life. Forgiveness is when we allow that trunk to remain there naturally, and we turn to broaden our gaze towards other brilliant flowers. In everyday life, perhaps someone has hurt us deeply. They may have said harsh words, betrayed our trust, or abandoned us in our weakest moments. These memories are like scratches in our heart, each recollection causing a sharp pang. Yet, let's ask ourselves if holding on to that pain makes us happier, or does it only make our heart heavier, causing us to miss opportunities to love those who are present? One afternoon, passing a rice field after harvest, we see the withered stalks remaining in the golden field. If the farmer clung to those old stalks and refused to till the soil, how could new seeds be sown next season? Similarly, when we refuse to let go of resentment, our heart will not have enough room to nurture love. Forgiveness is the act of plowing and tilling the soil of the soul to prepare for a season of peaceful sowing. Some people realize, after many years, that forgiveness is not a gift for others, but a gift for oneself. When we forgive, we give our heart the opportunity to heal. We give our soul the opportunity to feel lighter. The truth is, sometimes the other person has long forgotten their wrongdoing, and only we are left holding on to the suffering. Forgiveness, then, is letting go of the ego, not for the other person to win, but for our heart to be free. In a Dharma talk, the Buddha recounted that there were two people holding on to hatred. One carried it like a heavy stone, carrying it everywhere, tired and restless. The other knew how to let go, so they walked lightly and freely. The same event, but different choices, led to different outcomes. Forgiveness is choosing to walk freely, not allowing burdens to tie down our steps. If we look deeply, we will see that whoever harms us does so from their own weaknesses and ignorance. Those who speak harsh words do so because their hearts are suffering. Those who betray trust do so because they are not strong enough to keep their promises. Those who abandon us do so because they lack the courage to face things. When we see these roots, we will easily let go of blame. Forgiveness, at this moment, is not condoning, but understanding. Understanding that they too are just human beings struggling in the whirlwind of suffering, just as we once were. When we forgive, we not only heal ourselves, but also sow a seed of peace into this world. A forgiving mind is like a raindrop falling on dry ground, softening the earth so it can receive green sprouts. If we can forgive one person, if we can soften one heart, then love can spread a little further. Perhaps you have suffered profound hurt. Perhaps deep within your heart, there are still unhealed scars. But remember, forgiveness does not mean forgetting, but choosing for the pain to no longer have the power to control your life. Forgiveness does not change the past, but it can open up a brighter future. One day, when you truly let go of resentment, you will feel your heart light as a leaf falling from a branch, unburdened. The wind passes, the leaf floats towards the vast sky, free and unhindered. Forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give ourselves to live a peaceful life. And now, if the image of someone who still causes you pain appears in your mind, take a deep breath and smile. Whisper, "I choose to forgive, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." When you can say that, you have begun to open the door of healing for your heart. Forgiveness is not easy, but it is not impossible either. It requires courage, patience, and above all, compassion. But when you walk that path, you will realize that forgiveness is one of the most precious gifts of someone who knows how to let go of the ego. And in that gift, you will find true freedom, find a vast sky for your soul to fly into. There's a very peculiar thing in our inner life that few people pay attention to. That is, the ego does not only exist when we struggle in the marketplace, competing for every bit of fame and fortune, but it can also hide very subtly throughout the spiritual journey itself. People often think that when they have sought out the Dharma, have practiced meditation, chanted the Buddha's name, recited sutras, or performed good deeds, it means the ego has greatly diminished. But in reality, if one does not observe carefully, it is precisely when we think we are practicing better that the ego is silently growing, putting on a new cloak, appearing pure, but still full of traps. One afternoon in the temple, two people were chanting sutras together. One chanted with all humility, wishing only to quiet his mind, reciting each word as if to water his arid soul. The other also chanted, but in his heart he fleetingly thought, "I read better. My voice is more resonant. Surely everyone will respect me." Both were chanting sutras, but one was nurturing light, while the other was nurturing the ego. The difference is very subtle, hard to see, but it determines where the path of practice leads. The Buddha once taught that the ego is like darkness. It doesn't just reside in crude, easily recognizable actions, but can also seep into every hidden thought. Sometimes we give alms to the poor, but in our hearts, we secretly hope someone witnesses it so we can be praised. Sometimes we yield in an argument, but in reality, it's so others will see us as generous. In all these moments, the ego skillfully hides beneath a veneer of virtue. It is so subtle that if we are not mindful, we will think we are walking the path of liberation, when in fact, we are still bound. In everyday life, it is the same. Some people, after starting to learn about the Dharma, develop a subtle arrogance. They compare themselves to those who do not know the Dharma, feeling they are superior, that they understand life better. But the truth is, the deeper one practices, the more one needs to see oneself as small amidst the vast current of life, like a river that the further it flows downstream, the wider and deeper its waters become, and also the more quietly humble it is. If the deeper we go into practice, the more we compare and become arrogant, it means we are going against the current. Try to imagine a flower blooming in a garden. It does not boast its colors to any other flower. It does not need to prove that it is the most beautiful. It simply emits its fragrance silently. Whoever passes by can enjoy it. If no one sees it, it is still fine. A practitioner should also be like that flower. No need to show off, no need to prove anything. Just silently radiating inner peace from one's own heart will naturally bring benefit to all beings. If, on the path of practice, the thought still arises in one's heart that I am superior to others, I have come far, then in reality, one has not gone far at all. It's like a mountain climber. The higher they ascend, the vaster the sky appears, and the smaller they feel before nature. The deeper a practitioner goes, the more boundless they find the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings, and the more they feel they need to learn, to be more humble. In a sutra, the Buddha emphasized that practice is not for boasting, but for illuminating oneself. When that light is truly kindled, we will realize how much darkness within our hearts has not yet dissolved. It is precisely recognizing those areas of darkness that is a sign of progress. But if we only see ourselves as enlightened, as superior to others, then in reality, we are still submerged in the darkness of the ego. Human life is inherently impermanent. This body does not last forever. So what meaning does the reputation of being a good practitioner hold? It is like a breeze passing through a meadow, leaving a slight ripple, then vanishing. All that pride is merely fleeting. What truly remains is inner peace, the ability to live each moment fully with compassion and wisdom. If now, deep in your heart, there is still some comparison, gently look directly at it. Do not judge, and do not hastily try to drive it away. Just smile and whisper, my ego is still here. When we recognize it, we have begun to have a guiding light. And day by day, that light will help the ego gradually melt like ice under the sun. Let practice become a path for you to return to yourself, not a race to win or lose against anyone. That path will sometimes be lonely, sometimes full of challenges, but it is also the only path that leads you to true refuge. Do not let the ego deceive you into thinking you are progressing, when in reality, you are just circling around. And now, if you are listening to these words in a quiet moment, take a deep breath to calm your mind. Remind yourself that practice is not to be praised by anyone, nor to prove that you are superior. Practice is simply to illuminate oneself, to let the heart be at peace, to let the eyes see life with more gentleness, so that every step taken in this life is light and free. When we truly understand that, the ego will gradually lose its foothold. It will no longer have ground to grow, and instead, compassion will blossom in the heart. That compassion is the most beautiful fruit of the spiritual journey. A flower that does not need to show off its colors, but has enough power to spread its fragrance throughout the world. There is a very quiet moment in life that if one has ever touched it, they will no longer crave anything else. That is when the ego no longer leads, no longer pulls, and our mind returns to its initial simplicity, like a crystal clear lake after a rain, where every ripple has settled for the moonlight to shine. At that moment, we no longer feel the need to prove our worth to anyone, nor do we feel the need to strive to be very high to be recognized. We just need to be present fully, genuinely, and purely. In the days when we were still entangled, perhaps each of us has felt tired of living under the gaze of others. We strive for achievements, for praise, for outsiders to see us as valuable. But the more we try like that, the deeper down we feel a sense of emptiness. Because the ego is never satisfied. It always demands more. It is like a bottomless thirst. No matter how much you drink, it's never enough. But then one day, when we stop, when we gently put down the burden and release the ego from our clenched hand, happiness comes in unexpected simplicity. The Buddha once taught that all sentient beings inherently possess Buddha nature, meaning they already have a pure, clear, and complete essence. But because of the ego, because of attachment to self, we obscure that light ourselves. It is like a sky that is inherently blue, but covered by dark clouds. When the clouds disperse, the sky does not need to find its blueness again, because it was never lost in the first place. Similarly, when we let go of the ego, we don't have to search far for serenity, because serenity is already within. A Zen master told a story about a little boy who often stood by a river. Each time he watched the water flow, he would bend down and see his face reflected in the water. One day, a strong wind blew. The water's surface rippled, and the image distorted. The boy was bewildered and thought he had lost himself. But then, when the wind stopped, the water became calm again, and his face appeared clearer than ever. The ego is the same. When the mind is still turbulent, we see ourselves distorted. We feel we must search for an image to cling to. But when the mind is still, when the ego no longer manipulates, then the true essence will manifest, shining brightly without needing embellishment. In life, sometimes we think happiness lies in brilliant successes, in being honored, in being recognized by everyone. But after experiencing many losses and changes, we realize that true happiness is present in very ordinary things. A quiet morning, a hot cup of tea, a selfless smile, a hand holding another hand. When the ego no longer interjects its demands, these simple things become priceless. Happiness is no longer about how much more we have than others, but about how truly we can live with ourselves. The ego often wants us to stand out, wants us to be praised, but our pure essence only wants us to be present. A wild flower by the roadside doesn't need people to admire it to spread its fragrance. It still blooms, still emits its gentle scent, then withers and returns to the earth, not needing anyone to remember it. A person who knows how to live with their pure essence is like that flower, not competing, not showing off, just living wholeheartedly in every moment. try to stop and listen to yourself. When you no longer think about how others see you, no longer feel the need to compare, no longer worry about where you stand on the social ladder, your soul feels incredibly light. That lightness is the sign that the ego has settled and the pure essence is shining forth. It's like stepping out of a cramped, dusty room and taking a deep breath of the fresh air of a green forest. In the sutras, the Buddha emphasized that liberation is not about going somewhere far away, but about letting go of the bonds in the mind. When no longer pulled by the ego, we naturally become free. Then, all events that come are received with a calm mind. We don't boast when we win, nor fear when we lose. Praise doesn't excite us. Criticism doesn't hurt us. Because we have touched inner freedom, a freedom that no power or money can buy. If you're listening to these words now, and there is still a slight, lingering concern in your heart, please close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are sitting by a clear lake. All ripples are gradually settling, and every passing breeze becomes gentle. Then you see the blue sky reflected in the lake's surface, and you also see your true self reflected there. Not fragmented, not distorted, only pure and peaceful. That is truly you, not the complex ego that often speaks up, but you in your pristine simplicity. Believe that within every human being there is such a place, a clean, vast, and luminous place. When the ego vanishes, that place naturally opens. And from that point, happiness is no longer something to chase after, but something to live with every day. And so the invitation here is truly simple. Practice letting go of the ego in every small moment. Practice living fully with what is present. Each time you do that, you are taking one step closer to your own pure essence. And once you have touched that place, you will understand that true happiness does not lie in being superior to anyone, but in being able to be fully present with yourself and with this life in profound peace. There are evenings when the sun gradually sets behind the bamboo grove, and a gentle breeze softly blows across the meadow. We sit still and listen to the whispers of life. In that moment, all heaviness seems to vanish. Only the lightness of earth and sky, of breath, of the soul returning to itself remains. All those months and days spent tirelessly chasing after wins and losses suddenly become distant, no longer important. We realize that living is not about holding on or proving something, but about letting go and opening our hearts. It is precisely when we let go of the ego that we experience no loss, but instead open up a boundless freedom. Open up a vast heart full of compassion. In the journey of seeking peace, many often fear that without the ego, we will be overpowered, looked down upon, or left behind. But the opposite is true. The ego is like an iron cage. We think it protects us, but in reality, it imprisons the freedom of the soul. When we remove that iron cage, we do not become weak, but become self-reliant and free. When we no longer have to compete, we find life becomes vaster and more tolerant, like a bird soaring in the wide sky, no longer tied by ropes, with only free wings and infinite space to open its heart. The Buddha repeatedly spoke of the value of humbling the ego. He taught that when the ego diminishes, love grows. When the heart humbles itself, happiness appears. That teaching is simple, yet reveals a profound truth. The ego often separates us from others. It erects invisible walls that cause us to compare, to be suspicious, to close our hearts. But when the ego dissolves, those walls crumble, and the flow of love begins to gush forth. We no longer see the other person as an adversary, no longer see the world as a place to defend ourselves, but see everyone as a fellow traveler on a shared life journey. I remember a simple story about two friends traveling in the desert. They argued, and one, in anger, slapped the other. The one who was slapped remained silent and then wrote in the sand, "Today, my friend slapped me." They continued their journey until they reached an oasis. The one who had been slapped, unfortunately, fell into the water, and the other friend saved his life. Afterward, he took a knife and carved into a stone, "Today, my friend saved my life." The other friend asked, "Why, when I hurt you, did you write in the sand? But when I saved you, you carved it into stone?" He smiled and replied, "Because when I am hurt, I write in the sand so the wind can carry it away. But when I receive a kindness, I carve it into stone so it will never fade." That story illustrates a heart that has humbled the ego, that has learned to let go of resentment and preserve love. Living in this world, we cannot avoid conflicts. There will be people who hurt us, people who cause us pain. If the ego is still strong, we will carry that resentment, nurture it, and let it weigh down our soul. But when we let go of the ego, we can forgive, not because the other person deserves it, but because we want to liberate ourselves. Forgiveness is not forgetting, but choosing not to let the past control the present. Letting go is not weakness, but an inner strength. True happiness appears not when we achieve great things, but when we can live lightly in every moment. When we can smile at ourselves and at others. Those who know how to let go of the ego often smile, not because they no longer face difficulties, but because they have learned not to let difficulties bind them. That smile is like a plum blossom blooming in winter, both gentle and strong, both small and brightly illuminating the entire space. Imagine you are walking through a forest after a rain. Everything is fresh. Leaves glisten with raindrops. The earthy scent is subtle. And the blue sky emerges after the clouds disperse. In that moment, you no longer recall worries or fears, but only feel yourself in harmony with nature. Feel your soul open wide. That is the image of letting go. When the ego is set aside, we truly see how beautiful life is. The Buddha once said, "To find the path to peace, one must first learn to let go." No one can carry an entire mountain of rocks on their shoulders and still travel far at ease, nor can anyone simultaneously cling tightly to the ego and wish for their mind to be peaceful. This simple lesson sometimes takes us an entire lifetime to fully understand. But once understood, every breath becomes an opportunity for us to return, to be as free as clouds drifting, as water flowing. So if you are listening to these words now, please allow yourself a moment of true stillness. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let go. Let go of all the burdens in your heart. No need to think about who is right or wrong. No need to remember who hurt you. Just let your heart open. When you open the door of your mind, you will find that love was already there. Happiness was already here, and freedom never left you. May you, after this journey of listening, carry with you one simple but precious thing. Let the ego diminish so love can grow. Let your heart humble itself so happiness can naturally appear. And may you, from today, learn to gently let go, live humbly and compassionately, so that this life is as free as clouds floating across the sky, as water flowing smoothly through the vast wilderness,